as just mentioned before, like a lot of you, I was also an international student. So just giving you some information about how I came from international student to now the citizen in Australia. Perhaps it can give you some inspirations about what the life could be after you complete your study. And then we're going to go into a deep dive of the Australian job market. So in particular, we're sharing more about the graduate program as that is my expertise. And then going into some information about how to write a resume in Australia and some techniques or tips for interview preparations. So lastly, we'll have some time for Q&A. So just before we start, I just want to understand our audience a bit better. So who here is currently studying a bachelor's degree? Okay, yeah, about half you. How about master's students? Okay. And any high school students? Okay. So most of you studying either bachelor or master's. Okay. So just the course might be a bit small, but it's okay. I'll share the details. So I actually came here quite early. I came here during 2011. So I studied year 11 and year 12 high school here in Australia, and then I moved to university. So I studied a Bachelor of Computer Science and Technology at the University of Sydney. And after I graduated, I actually didn't go into the job market straight away. I spent about a year doing part-time job and also accumulated the points to get PR. So a lot of you may know for skill immigration, you need to accumulate points like IELTS tests and stuff like that. So I spent a year just doing professional years, my NATI and now I do CCL translation certifications and then my IELTS. Towards the end of 2017, I accumulated, I believe, enough points. So I started for the job hunting. And at 2018, I started my first full-time job at a multinational tech company called VMware. At that time, I went in as a graduate, so part of the graduate program, but eventually I switched a number of roles to become the person that managed the entire graduate program. So I managed the graduate program across Asia Pacific, so including Australia, Japan, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, India, countries like that. And about 2 years ago, I switched my career again. So I wanted to have a different career because of the experiences and the career growth. So now I am a product manager at a. So that's my story in a nutshell. And now let's dive into the core for today, the Australian job. So the first thing I want to share with you is that according to the research, actually 60 to 80% of the Australian jobs are secured through unadvertised channels like referrals or internal hires or direct outreach. Even for myself, ever since the first full-time job I had, none of the jobs were offered through advertised channels like SQL, LinkedIn. I got all of my jobs through either referral or internal transfers. So what I'm trying to say here is that it is very crucial to build a quality network around you while you are studying. So I'm not saying that you need to go all the way out to attend every single networking event possible. What I want to say is because you're still studying, you have a great time to build a network through your university degree. So things like group projects or internships or part-time jobs, there are a lot of opportunities out there. Don't just stick into a small group of friends. Because I know a lot of people do that throughout the 3 years of uni. Every single group project is stuck into the same group of friends. So try to diversify your network to make sure that you get a lot of opportunities when you graduate. So you never know, the person who sits next to you today, in 3 years' time, maybe your referral to help you get into your first job in Australia. So that's the first tip. And now let's dive into a little bit more about the graduate program framework in Australia. So before we start, I just want to ask, Has everyone heard of the term graduate program before or not? Yes? Not? Okay. Right. So just to give you a little bit of intro, so graduate program basically is a program for university graduates, and then it is aimed to help graduates to get their first job and then provide a lot of trainings and career growth pathways to enter into the Australian job market. So it is a very competitive and very unique type of job that is available for university graduates. A typical graduate program timeline will look like this. So the recruitment kind of process will start in March, April, which is about now, and then the actual program will start March next year. So the first tip here I will provide is if you are in your final year of university degree, start applying for grad program now because the time it starts next year. If you already graduate and then you apply now, then you waste about a year to wait for the program to start. So usually the recruitment timeframe is not just one round. We usually have a summer round, which is about now, and then the winter round, which is semester 2 for non-Chinese university. So between now and then, there is a period where the companies will start the initial screening. So some companies do like an HR phone call, and some companies will actually send out online test or video interview. So this is kind of the time frame for the initial round. Following the close of the winter round hiring season, it goes to the actual hardcore interview stage. So this round you have group interview, panel interview, or one-on-one interview, depending on the company size or industry is a bit different. So group interview means you have a lot of candidates in the room, will be divided into small groups, and then you will be tasked to do an assignment or kind of a quick exercise together, and then at the end you may be asked to do a presentation together. There will be a lot of judges that will be observing you when you are doing a group discussion, which we'll go into that later. For panel interview, it means you are the only candidate in the room, and then there will be 2 or more judges or interviewers that sit opposite you. So usually one of them will be the hiring manager, who is the person you are going to report to if you get the job. There will be some other people that will be people you may need to work with after you get a job in the same team or the slightly different team that you collaborate with. So those will be very important because they need to identify you as a person that can collaborate in different functional teams. And they may ask you some questions that are a bit different, like technical questions, soft skills questions, like behavioral questions, etc. So those are the interview rounds. And then come the offer time. So offer time is a bit different for different industry, but generally it will be between September and December. And the tip I want to share here is that's not the end. A lot of times there will be students tell me like, oh, I didn't get an offer in December. I'm lost. There's no chance I can get to grad program this year. But that's not true. Because if, for example, I'm the recruiter and I offer you a position, you may turn me down. You may reject the offer. But because the headcount or the hiring position is fixed, so I have to fill that gap. So in January and February, because the program starts in March, there is a slight chance that some of the empty positions will be released at that time. And because the company doesn't have enough time to do all the interview and panel interview, etc., so what they usually do is they ask the alumni who's a graduate who joined the company last year, do you have some friends or do you know anyone from your university that might be interested in this position? So those positions may come out from the unadvertised channels. So some positions may be still released from the program connection and stuff like that, but that is also a very good opportunity to pick those up because the interview standards will be lower for those fronts. And lastly, go to March and then the program starts. How long? That's right. So now we kind of talked about the grad program and the timeline. And you may be thinking, okay, I'm so ready to apply for the grad program role. That's great. So now let's think about what you need to do when you apply for a job. So the first thing a lot of you may notice is, of course, resume. So now I want to share with you a little bit about how to write a good resume in Australia. So first of all, this is kind of the typical structure of a resume in Australia. You have your name, your contact details, your summary, working experiences or project experiences, your skill sets, your education background, and lastly, your reference. I want to highlight one thing here is your summary. So summary is like a mini cover letter. What does that mean? So you need to highlight, summarize your entire career, including your strengths, your specialties, and your skill sets into 2 or 3 sentences. It is a crucial part of your resume because recruiters usually only have like 10 to 20 seconds to skim through your resume. And the first thing they see is your summary. So writing a good summary is very important. I do also recommend if you do have the time to tailor your summary to each job that you're applying for. So you don't have to change word by word. What I typically use is I'll use a 3 sentence structure. So the first sentence is who I am. The second sentence is my skill sets or experiences that are very critical for this role. And then the last sentence is my career aspiration, what I'm trying to look for in this job. So the second sentence and the third sentence, you may be able to tailor to different industry or different role you apply for. And then the rest can be like a template. The second thing I want to highlight here is reference. So you don't have to always write the reference contact and email on your resume. You don't have the space. You can write something like reference available on request or something like that. And when you get to that stage of the interview, you can provide your reference then. And I do also want to highlight, do not just copy this order because you should tailor your resume to suit your own situation. What do you mean by that? So, for example, because I've been in the industry for like 7 years now, education is not important anymore. So I put it in the second page. But if I was a graduate and I'm looking for a graduate role, I will definitely put my education background right after something. So do make sure you tailor a little bit. And sometimes you may not have work experience, you might not have enough project experiences. You can add another section to write your volunteering experience or your internship experience. So it all depends on what you want to highlight to the recruiter. Right. And then here comes to some common mistakes or pitfalls I see a lot of the students will make when they are trying to write a resume. So the first thing first is do not include your photo. So I know a lot of the Asian countries, they have a typical resume structure to include a photo. But in Australia, photo, birthday, height, weight, hobby, and things like that, they are irrelevant information for hiring. So for recruiters, they are just noise. They will very hard for a recruiter to really focus on the actual skills and experience. And there's no specific rule that say you can't write this, but I highly recommend just save the same space to write something more important. The next part is do not write long paragraphs. What I mean by that is sometimes in your work history or project experience, you're trying to explain what you do at your work or what's an your experience about. Do not write like 2 to 3 sentences altogether. Try to use bullet point. This is for the readability reason because the recruiters only have a few seconds. I want to make sure you have the best format for them to read. I also do suggest to highlight key points. You can use bold, italic, or even just a highlighter to make it even easier for the recruiter to read the important things you want to highlight on the resume. Next thing This one is very, very hard. It takes some time to practice. Do not write generic tasks. So, for example, I write something in my resume. Collaborate in a team environment to deliver a business proposal. It sounds alright, but it actually doesn't give recruiter any useful information if I just look at that sentence. You don't highlight your actual skill set. You didn't highlight what you actually do in that role. So make sure you always include stats or achievements or the impact that you made in that job. That will make you stand out in the pile of like 50 resumes. So next up, do not write GPA. So I know GPA is a really common term when you're studying in States or in some Asian countries, but in Australia the grading system is different. So I would suggest to use WAN, which is the weighted average mark, or at least you can write something like distinction average or high distinction average and things like that. Those are the terms that Australian hiring managers are used to. So do make sure you use a system that is commonly used in Australia. And next up, we have this. Do not write your visa status. So I know all international students, so visa is very important. But in the typical recruitment process, there will be a part where the recruiter asks you your visa status. Just provide your visa status then. Don't waste your space in your resume to write that information. Again, that's relevant for the resume purpose. And then don't mix UK and US spelling. So a lot of words like recognize, analyze, it has a Z at the end. Those are US spelling. So make sure you change it to S because that's the UK spelling. And if you mix these spellings, it's gonna be very easy for the recruiter to tell that you didn't run through your grammar check. So last one I want to highlight is very, very important. Do not write English as a skill on your resume. For example, if you are in China or if you are in Malaysia, you try to apply for a role, you wouldn't write Chinese or Malaysia in your resume because you should already know that. It's gonna be something that you already practice using every day. So same here, if you are applying for a job in Australia, think about like you are applying for a job as a local student. You wouldn't write English as a skill. Same as other languages. Unless it's specified in the job ad that, for example, Mandarin is a plus, then you write Mandarin in your resume. Otherwise, just don't need to write it. So last thing about resume I want to highlight here is experience is the highest priority. Grades are less. So this is just something unique in Australia. In Australia job market, we do look at experiences a lot, and grades are typically not as important. Of course, if you are applying for a graduate job, you can highlight your grade. But what I want to say here is, if you are still studying now, try to get as much internship, as much as side project experiences as possible before you graduate, because that will make you stand out, and that is what a recruiter is looking for. Okay, so now that you've written a really good resume, you're about to go into the interview. So what tips do I have for you? The first one is HR phone interview. So do make sure you are in a quiet environment with no background noise, because unlike video interview, sometimes you can kind of guess what the person is saying by looking at the screen. If you are talking on the phone and you have a really bad reception, or you have a lot of people partying behind you, it's just gonna be impossible for the recruiter to hear what you say, and then you just a really bad impression. And secondly, prepare behavioral questions. So a lot of the interviews will have behavioral questions towards the middle, like the group interview and panel interview. But we do see more and more recruiters ask behavioral questions at the beginning stage of the interview. So do make sure you are prepared when you go into a phone call. Just make sure you have something in mind before you go. And lastly, make sure you know the time frame for getting the interview. So this is because a lot of time you get ghosted after, right? And usually that means you don't get through. But if you do know when the result will come out, for example, you ask that question at the end of your HR interview, and the HR tell you, okay, you are expecting a result in a week time, and you don't hear from them after a week, you can send a follow-up email. If you send a follow-up email in the right time, some good recruiters will actually give you constructive feedback. So this one is quite interesting. The next one we have group interview. So it may sound a bit weird. Don't keep it quiet and don't dominate conversation. So what do I do? So what I'm trying to say is apply your active listening skill in a group environment. For example, when you hear about the other student talking about a specific opinion, what you can do is kind of repeat the opinion in your own words to make sure you understand what they're trying to convey to you, and then give your own opinion. So this way, you're not keeping complete quiet in the discussion. You're also not dominating the entire conversation. And lastly, practice speak presentation skills in advance. Because in a lot of the group interviews, you will be tasked to work in a group environment and then give a presentation in, say, 15 minutes or 30 minutes time. And as we all know, English is not our first language, and in that kind of high-stake environment, it would be very easy to be nervous. So what you can do is to give yourself a specific topic at home, and then time yourself. You have to complete this presentation in, say, 5 minutes, and then just keep practicing that so that you're very used to, or at least you're comfortable of this time pressure, and you can perform a really good result in the actual interview. So next up, we have the panel interview or hiring manager interview. So in this type of interview, depending on your role, if you study engineering or IT, you may be asked some technical questions. Sometimes you may be asked by other team members about behavioral questions. Just make sure you prepare everything and do not bluff. So if you don't know something, it's okay to say you don't know. For the recruiters, they know you're a graduate. You're not supposed to do every single thing in the world. So just be honest with the recruiter. And do remember what skills that you write in your resume and the examples of using each one of them. So for example, you write Python in the resume. You're going to assume the hiring manager will ask you, oh, you wrote Python on your resume, so what did you use? What project did you apply this skill to? And if you can't say anything, then it will be easily told that you're one. So I'm not saying you have to master a skill before you put it on your resume. What I'm trying to say is remember what you write and remember what you can say for each skill. And the last tip here is just my own kind of interview strategy. Interview your dream company at last. So what I mean by that is you can always apply for some small companies to start with, just to make sure you can get a really good playing ground to practice your interview skill sets. And after you get used to the interview requirement, then you apply for your dream job or your dream company. So you don't fall into the case where you apply for a dream company. I'm so excited, but then you never had any experience interviewing before, and then you stop. Okay, so last thing I want to share with you. This is one of my favorite graphs. So remember, your career is not like a straight tunnel that you have to follow the same path for the next 30 years. There might be something or some paths that are close to you already. You may think like, oh, I should have done internship when I was in year one, or oh, I should have written this in my resume before I applied for a job. But those were the paths that were close to you. So the most important thing is there are still a lot of different combinations that you can create from today. If you look at my experience, I didn't do just one job for 7 years. I actually switched between I think 4 or 5 different roles, and I'm fine. So you don't have to be stuck in one particular path forever. And this is just how the world works now. And if you do like look at this in a positive attitude and then you put the best part of yourself to every stage of the job application process, then I'm sure you're going to have a bright future. So that's all for the content for today. If you do need some help with writing a resume, I do provide a resume editing service. So you can scan QR code, or if you want to contact me through social media, I'm available on most of the platforms except for TikTok. So yeah, that's all for today. I wish you every best for your career, and if you do have any questions, you can ask or just raise your hand.